Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your favorite news source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, here as always with my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's Friday night, TGIF. Looking forward to the weekend.
Yes, it is Friday night. Normally, we record these on Thursday night, but we had some technical difficulties last night, which has caused us to push it back to tonight, and we appreciate your patience. But yeah, we do these pre-games every single week for the coming game, and then we do post-games every Sunday night for a follow-up and a bit of a deep dive analysis into the game itself. So thank you for coming and joining us for our pre-game for this Sunday's game, Packers Patriots in Lambeau, Sunday afternoon. And if you want any more information about what we're doing, you can come follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker, or check us out on YouTube, Father Son Packers Podcast. The Twitter is where we kind of tweet out our new episodes, any news and notes from Packers land, any analysis, thoughts we have on what's going on with the Packers, what's going on in Green Bay, and it's just a nice place to come check out a bit of a conglomeration of Packers news. But as we go forward, Dad, do you want to just hop right into this Packers-Patriots pregame?
Sure. Looking forward to this stretch of AFC, NFC East games.
Yes.
Kind of some of the easiest part of our schedule. I think most people would agree.
Yeah, I'm excited for all of that stretch of games, except for, there's some tough opponents in the Eagles, Bills, and Dolphins, but
that's
I think
later.
Yes, that is later. We do
these next four. We got
Patriots, Jets, Giants, and those are the next three, and Commanders. Yes, I love that stretch. Can the whole season be that stretch? Can we always play these teams? I would like to apply for a transfer to the NFC East, although, to be honest, the NFC North has treated us quite well, so maybe I should count our blessings. But anyway, like we do every week with our pre-games, we like to start with the injury report because it is a very important note. And because we're recording on Friday, we actually have the official injury report for the game. So, Dad, I'm just going to buzz right through it, if that's all right with you.
Sure, we can have a few observations here and there.
Yeah, but I'm going to just buzz really quick through the Packers part. So for the Packers, they have actually probably the cleanest injury report they've had so far this season. Jair Alexander is questionable. He got in a limited participation after being a DNP on Thursday. Got a limited participation in on Friday, but he is questionable for the game with the groin injury he sustained in the last game. And then Caleb Jones, one of their backup depth tackles, is out with an illness. But besides that, no one is on the injury report. David Bakhtiari is, while he's still not practicing every day, he is officially off the injury report. And Christian Watson has seemed to improve to a full participant as of Thursday and is looking like he's going to play.
No injury designation.
And no injury designation for either of them.
I think we would talk a little bit about this. So Bakhtiari's not practicing every day, but it was all planned. The fact that he's able to play 2 weeks in a row is
knock on wood.
Great. And Jenkins kind of the same schedule now, where he's not practicing every day, but he's going, multiple weeks in a row.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is Bakhtiari not having had a setback after last game. Because if you remember, last year against the Lions, he tried to play. He played about a half, and the knee just swelled up on him throughout the course of the next week, and he was unable to play in the playoffs. And they had to shut it down, and he had to get further surgeries. So it seems like his knee took well to the limited action he had against Tampa.
Yep, right. So this is the furthest he's been along in 21 months.
Yeah.
So look, we're trying to feel good about this.
No bad news is good news at this point.
Yep, and the fact that Jair still has a chance to play this week is a little bit of a surprise. We'll see what happens.
I would assume he does not play because
it's
probably should take it. Yeah, probably should take it easy. It's New England, and it's New England without their starting quarterback, which kind of leads us right into the New England side of the injury report. Dad, if you didn't have anything more you wanted to add about the Packers,
nope. We should move on to the much more extensive New England injury list.
Yes, the Patriots have, it looks like, 10 players on their injury report. Most importantly, though, of which is Mac Jones, their starting quarterback, who will not play this weekend. Brian Hoyer will start in his place. He had a high ankle sprain at the end of the last game that looked bad, had to get carried to the locker room, and it is, in fact, bad enough where we will have to miss this game. This is the biggest piece of news and the biggest reason that the Packers are 11-point favorites versus the Patriots this weekend.
Despite everything you heard Bill Belichick saying partway through the week of how, we haven't decided yet, maybe he's going to play. Was there a single person in the room who believed a word of that?
No.
I can't imagine it.
Yeah, it looked... I mean, he didn't put any weight on it going to the locker room. He had to be
He
carried
had
to
to
the
hop
locker room.
off to the edge of the field.
There were reports on Tuesday that this is the type of injury that many players do end up getting surgery for. So it definitely seemed like...
And take like 4 to 10 weeks.
Exactly. It seemed like very much so that he was going to miss this game. But he will be, and that's a big reason why the Packers should win this game. Beyond that, Lawrence Guy, one of their starting D tackles, is out. Yadni Kajus, one of their backup tackles, is out. Kyle Duggar, one of their starting safeties, is questionable after being limited all week. Joshua Bledsoe, one of their safeties, is questionable. Devon Godshaw, one of their D linemen, is questionable. Raekwon McMillan, one of their linebackers, is questionable. Jacoby Myers, probably their best receiver, is questionable. Jalen Mills, one of their starting corners, is questionable. And Adrian Phillips, another one of their safeties, is questionable. So a lot of people dinged up in that secondary, Dad.
Yes. Some of them got hurt during the last game. I think that was Duggar, I think, got hurt during the last game.
I believe so, yes. I think I remember that.
Jacoby Myers missed the last game with this same injury.
Yeah, his knee has been bugging him for a couple weeks now. But he is probably their best receiver.
He certainly is their target hog.
Yeah.
He's more of a possession receiver than a downfield threat.
Yes, Aguilar is more of their Aguilar and Devontae Parker are more.
I would
of their
say their other
threats.
3 main receivers are all downhill threats, and they don't really have a possession receiver besides Myers.
Yeah, I think Bourne
Aguilar and Parker all are more downfield.
I think Bourne could step into that possession role if they needed him to,
Possibly,
more so than the other two. But I think the biggest thing are the people who are dinged up in their secondary, which I think will be important in this game to see who is able to go for them, because Duggar at least is one of their primary playmakers on defense. He was a high draft pick, high second-round pick a couple years ago, and he's a supreme athlete, and he flies around the ball near the line of scrimmage. And I think not having him will severely hurt their run defense because he is a big sideline-to-sideline guy. But anyway...
Yeah, and their coverage has already not been very good on the back end.
Yeah, but we'll get into more of that.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. But that is the injury report for the game. Packers are looking pretty dang healthy. New England Patriots slightly less so, although a lot of these questionable guys were limited during the week, so they were able to practice at least in some capacity. And I would expect most of the questionable guys are able to play. Next, what we like to do, one of our favorite segments, is as part of our game preview, is the Blast from the Past, where we talk a little bit about when the Packers have played this team before. But Dad, this week it's really not that impactful.
This blast is from way in the past with regard to the structure of the two teams now. The last time they played was before LaFleur was coach. Brady was still the Tampa quarterback. There was a ton has changed. There's only one.
Buddy Holly was the top of the charts. The front of the New York Times read Hindenburg.
Sputnik goes into space.
Yes, but pretty much, I think the gist of it is that this past game, where Green Bay lost 31-17, and it was the year that New England won the Super Bowl versus the Rams, is really not that indicative of this matchup, but it is just kind of a nice little blast from the past. It was 4 years ago now.
And just think, in 4 years, things, as I say, NFL not for long.
Yeah.
It was an interviewing for the Packers. Only one receiver who is on the team now who caught a pass that day.
It's Cobb.
That's Cobb, who left and came back.
I was going to say it's Cobb.
And for New England, they don't have anybody left who caught a pass that day. And the Green Bay defenders that are still here is just Jair, Kenny, and Lowry.
And that would have been Jair's rookie year. Yeah.
Right. So that's how much things have changed. Aaron Jones was already on the Packers. But yeah, it's just a ton of turnover.
Yeah, a lot of turnover since then, but that's kind of our blast from the past for the Patriots. Normally, sometimes, especially for rivalry games, we'll spend a little more time on this section, but for this one, we felt like it was kind of one we could breeze by. But so now let's go to our next section, what's going on in Patriots world. This is where we take a bit of a view into what the storylines for the opposing team are, how they've been looking this year, just kind of giving some information about the opponent because we think it's important to know about them, and we feel like you already know a lot about your own team, the Packers, but it's nice to know a little bit about the Patriots. So, Dad, what should our loyal listeners know about the Patriots?
So one of the first things I'd like to say is they've, I guess you say, brought back some former Patriots assistants to help their team, but Joe Judge and Matt Patricia. And the one of the weirdest things going on is like the offensive coordinator position. They don't really have one.
Well, that's what you're saying, is they brought back Joe Judge and Matt Patricia to be co-offensive coordinators. And if you don't know who Joe Judge and Matt Patricia are, they are both not very successful former head coaches, Joe Judge with the New York Giants and Matt Patricia with the Detroit Lions. But the more interesting thing about them is while they are currently co-offensive coordinators, both of their backgrounds, Joe Judge special teams and Matt Patricia defensive coordinator, have nothing to do with offense particularly. So it's a very interesting decision for them.
They kind of like Belichick was like refusing to name an offensive coordinator. He was like being very weird about what, people ask, well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on with their offense. Beyond that, they have a 1-2 record so far this year with losses to the Ravens as well as to the Miami Dolphins. And they beat the
Steelers.
The Steelers, yes.
17-14 in a rather low-scoring game.
Yes, thank you for catching that.
And so far, they've scored 7 points against the Dolphins, 17 against the Steelers, and 26 against the Ravens.
Yes, but more specifically, let's kind of look at that Ravens game, which was their game last week, where they lost 37-26 to the Baltimore Ravens, a bit of a barn burner. And when we're looking at the Patriots, it felt like to me, just looking at the game, that their offense ran the ball very well, with their running backs averaging about 4.95 yards per carry. And while they didn't generate many explosive plays in the run game, it seemed like they were able to get some consistent movement there.
And that's kind of been their story, is they've been a fairly good running team so far this year.
Yeah. They have two quite good running backs in Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Both of them are pretty dang good NFL players.
But neither one is explosive and fast.
They are more tackle-breaking type running backs than any kind of explosive runners. And
Stevenson is pretty big guy at 230. But they both have around like 4.6 in speed in the 40. So
when looking at their combine numbers.
Yeah,
I think Harris is a bit faster on the field than a 4.6, but yeah, they're not gonna take they're not gonna take it 80 yards, knock on wood, unless the Packers do something extremely wrong. Beyond that, in that game, Devontae Parker had a very nice game, generating explosive plays of 31, 40, and 36 yards. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, because even with Brian Hoyer, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and take those shots downfield. But on defense, Dad, their defense actually really struggled to stop the run versus the Ravens. And the Ravens are a very unique situation, what with Lamar Jackson's gravity as a threat with both his arm and his legs. But they still allowed 6.38 yards per carry to the running backs on Baltimore, who had been struggling to run the ball up until that point.
Yeah, though they had, I guess they had one long run for 34 yards, but not
the other second half.
For Lamar.
Yeah. I mean, even when you ignore Lamar's rushing, the Baltimore running backs, with J.K. Dobbins having his first game back, and then Justice Hill being kind of more of a depth piece, both were able to get the ball moving. And so that's probably something where we should look at for the Packers, and we will talk about briefly. And then, like we said before, last week, Mac Jones was lost to a leg injury that will probably keep him out some time, pretty much at the end of the game.
Yes. And we can talk a little bit about kind of things we expect from both sides going in this game as well, and what we might expect the New England to do.
That's kind of what happened last week, essentially, for the Patriots. Do you want to, like you were saying, do you want to move into Patriots-Packers now that matchup's looking? Seemed like we were kind of heading there anyway.
Right. So one thing I wanted to say, so that overall, the New England defense has been
pretty mediocre, I would say.
Overall, pretty mediocre.
Yeah. It looks like they were 16th in DVOA against the pass and 29th in DVOA against the run.
Right, so kind of middle of the pack in the pass and one of the worst teams against the run. And then on offense, they're only 22nd, according to Football Outsiders DVOA, passing the ball. But on offense, they're first in rushing the ball by DVOA.
Yeah, and I think that kind of takes us into what makes the Patriots a tough matchup, possibly, for the Packers. And do you want to talk a little bit about their rushing offense?
Break down a little bit both their offense and their defense.
Let's start with offense.
Okay, so their O-line is first in power run rating, but they're only middle of the pack in pass blocking.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of lines up with how their offense is performing in the rush and the pass.
Right, so they're having better success with what's called the power run, which is conversion on second and third and short for first downs. Mm-hmm. So that's something they've been good at. So one thing I expect, what might make the Patriots tough is that I think they're going to try to run the ball up the middle. Yeah, because New England is top 3 in the frequency of runs up the middle, but behind the guards in the center. Though their most success is actually running behind the right tackle. They're top 10 in success running up the middle. And then their poorest is running to the left. So we might see more of that power running game up the middle.
Mm-hmm. I think that's tough because I don't think it's going to be too big an issue when Kenny is playing, but on the snaps that he's not in, they're going to need Slayton and Reed, and if Wyatt gets more snaps this week, to really step up there.
Right, and it's not exactly a weakness of the Packers, though, because they're ninth in power success as a defense, but they are last in second level rank. So that's the ability of the linebackers to tackle when the ball carrier gets there, and that's probably almost exclusively due to that Chicago game.
Yeah, they really struggled to tackle in that Chicago game. It was nice to see them clean it up. It was nice to see them clean it up versus Tampa, though. It seemed like they tackled a lot better versus Tampa. The tackling
has gotten so much better. So actually, I think that ranking of last in that metric is a small sample size phenomenon.
And that wasn't specifically to power running, right? That second level grade?
No, that's the second level rank. Their power rank has been pretty good. And in that game, even in that game, I think their success at stuff percentage, ability to they had forced a lot of very short runs, but then when it got to the second level, it was 20 or 27. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that was just in 2 drives. So I don't think that's going to be a long-term problem.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots, I feel like, are always a tough matchup, and I think the thing that most makes them a tough matchup is Bill Belichick's coaching. They're a very well-coached team. They don't have the most talented roster, but Bill Belichick will... some of the not having the most talented roster is on Belichick, but he will squeeze as much talent as he can out of all of those players. And I think he's elite at specifically game planning game to game. He will take away the one thing that you're good at, and he'll sell out to do that and make you beat him with something that you're not as comfortable doing. And I think that's what makes the Patriots the toughest matchup to me. And
that's something maybe we could talk a little bit more about later.
Yeah.
But also I just talk about the New England defense.
Since we're talking about Belichick, might as well talk about the New England.
It's really
defense.
going to be the defense.
It's his baby.
And so the New England defense has actually been generally stronger than their offense this year. They're 7th in DVOA as part of their good run defense has been their 7th in adjusted line yards.
Mm-hmm.
But then
they're not getting pushed back much at all.
Well, it's kind of a mix. They're sort of their stuff rate and power success isn't great, but their second level play has been better. But some of that actually is a consequence of playing a 3-4. It's something that's common with playing a 3-4 rather than a 4-3. Is some of this ends up showing up as second level success rather than
because they give it to the edges.
First level success.
They say the edges are linebackers, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you have they're playing like a 2-gap scheme. Then the front is mostly just eating up blocks with the linebackers filling in to tackle.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, the Patriots, you can't name many of their players on defense as like stars. At least they have a lot of nice role players, and a lot of just solid players, but not a lot of stars, I would say. So I think that's part of what is impressive about them is the coaching that's able to get them up to this higher level of play. But I think we can kind of move on from here about what makes them a tough matchup and talk more specifically about how we think that they are going to try to exploit the Packers. Do you kind of want to start us off there about how you think they're going to try and attack us?
Right. And so some of this is a little bit of repeating what I got to already about how I think they're going to try to run up the middle, and that neither of the backs are particularly fast. So and maybe one of the reasons why 70% of the runs go up the middle and not try to beat with speed around the edge.
Yes, but you did mention, though, that they do like running at that right tackle spot, which is Isaiah Wynn, one of their one of their better O-linemen, and the Packers have struggled to contain the edges at times.
I think what it looks like, when you look at the data, it looks like they should run to the right more. That's where they're having the most success, but they're not doing it very often compared to running up the middle. I mean, that's what the numbers are showing right now. And so far, out of the two, like Stevenson is the better rated runner, and Harris is the better rated pass catcher per PFF grades.
Yeah.
And the other thing about how the Pats, I think, will try to exploit the Packers, and I think maybe touch on some of this, is that I think they're going to try to clog up the middle against the Packers running game.
Yeah.
Try to follow a blueprint like Tampa Bay, though they don't really have the horses.
Well, here's the thing, is because this is what I had for how I think the Patriots are going to try and exploit the Packers, and kind of ties into what I said earlier about Bill Belichick trying to make the other team beat the Patriots without their best weapon, and just kind of letting, like, if you can beat them in a second way, he's like, okay, then that's just how it's going to be. But I agree that I think they're going to sell out to stop the run. I think they're going to... I know they don't necessarily have the horses for man coverage on the outside, especially if Mills is going to be out. But I do think they're going to try and sell out to stop the run and stop Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and dare the Packers receivers to beat man coverage and just get open against zone in general. Because I think the Packers receiver core is probably one of their most unproven positions, if not their most unproven position. And it's certainly less proven than their running backs. And so I think Belichick's going to be like, hey, let's see if your receivers can beat me before you make me actually allocate resources to guarding them, and I'm going to stop your two best players on offense in Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and see what your counter is. And I think that's how they're going to try and exploit the Packers a little bit.
Yeah, and I think one thing that they might try to do, that like the Tampa Bay did, was to kind of crowd the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, a lot of mugged A-gaps. Like, yeah.
And plus, like, restrict the yards after catch. Mm-hmm. Same way that Tampa did. The Packers were throwing short, but then they weren't able to stack on yardage after that because the Tampa Bay stopped playing their secondary so deep in the second half.
Yeah,
and really crowded the line of scrimmage.
And just the way Tampa rallied and tackled was very impressive in that game, I thought.
So New England might try that. I think a lot of teams might try that because it worked for Tampa Bay against the Packers offense, but
not a lot of defenses are as talented as Tampa's.
Right. New England's secondary isn't nearly as good as Tampa Bay's, and their linebackers aren't nearly as fast.
Yep, that's 100% true. And I think just that it's tough because I think, like we said before, the Packers struggle to score when they can't run the ball, and I'm sure Belichick probably has realized that as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if that gave the Packers some troubles to start this game. But, the Packers aren't helpless, like we say every time. And I think that kind of leads us into some more optimism, perhaps, and talk about maybe how the Packers will try and exploit the Patriots on the other side.
Yeah, one thing I'd just like to say is we are trying to give an honest effort to find some way that the Patriots might try to exploit the Packers, even if we think that probability is low.
I hope you know they're going to win now. Now that you've said that, they are. I guarantee. I'm putting the mortgage on the Patriots, putting the house on the Patriots. Now that you've fully jinxed it, knock on wood.
But we are trying to find the possible strengths for the Packers' opponents.
Yeah, and I mean,
in all cases,
I don't know that the Patriots. They don't need to score a lot to beat the Packers. The Packers right now are not that high-powered of an offense. And if they can keep this game tight, just quickly jumping back to how the Patriots might exploit the Packers. If they can keep this game tight and low scoring and ugly, they're more than happy to do that, and I think that gives them a real chance to win.
I think that what the Packers have so far is they have enough inconsistency that their drives can sputter out. From series to series.
Oh, yeah.
I think they actually still have a pretty high ceiling if they can put it all together. But let's go on. You want to go first on how the Packers are going to exploit the Bucs?
Yeah, or hopefully. You mean the Patriots?
Sorry, the
but
Patriots.
Yes, I think
Bucs North.
Yeah, Buccaneers.
Brady's
the Buccaneers
Brady
are
Pryor.
The Buccaneers are Patriots South. Let's be honest. But how the Packers will attack the Patriots. So I think that this is interesting because I think. So I saw a Patriots reporter tweeting about this, and I cannot remember his name. So I'm sorry if it was this reporter, but he was tweeting about how Lawrence Guy, their defensive tackle, missing this game, he believed would have a big impact on the running defense. And I wanted to kind of look at that a little bit and see if that was something the Packers could take a look into. So Lawrence Guy missed the entire second half versus the Ravens last week. And while the Ravens did rush for 7.25 yards per carry in the second half after Guy was knocked out of the game, that number was largely, specifically their running backs, rushed for 7.25 yards per carry in the second half. That number was largely bolstered by one big run by Justice Hill that went for around 35 yards. And for the most part, their running backs actually really struggled, especially struggled rushing up the middle, running behind their guards just 3 times for 5 yards. And I know that the Packers have better running backs than the Ravens, and they will probably perform better on the ground than the Ravens did, or at least better on the ground for running backs than the Ravens did. But I actually think more so that the Packers should try and attack the New England safeties, especially given all the injuries they have there, with Duggar questionable to play, Adrian Phillips questionable to play, Jalen Mills questionable to play, and the fact that Devin McCourty is 35 years old. I would really like to see the Packers take some deep shots to both Christian Watson and Dobbs and really test the speed on that back line, because I don't think they have anyone that can run with either of those guys.
Yeah, and they really only have one defensive back who's rated pretty well by PFF, and that's Jonathan Jones. The rest of the secondary has not been performing very well so far this year, particularly in coverage. I think Duggar's been doing pretty well in run defense, but not in coverage.
But he's really the only, I would say, elite athlete on that back end who might have a chance to run with these guys, given his size and speed. But that's kind of how I think that the Packers should try and take advantage of it. I would love to see Watson and Dobbs actually getting some shots deep, because that's something that I know Watson didn't play versus Tampa Bay, but they really did not use Dobbs in that manner much at all versus Tampa Bay. It was a lot of like shallower stuff and letting him work after the catch, which is fine. But I would just like to see some shots downfield against a secondary where I think that they can be taken advantage of in that way. And that's how I would like to see the Packers try to exploit the Patriots. Dad, how do you feel like you want the Packers to exploit the Patriots?
Well, one thing I think, what I expect anyway, is that the Packers are going to try to, in some ways, pull a Belichick and take away their running game, which is New England's like bright spot on offense so far this year.
Especially with Mac Jones out, with Hoyer in, they're going to be handing the ball off like crazy.
Right, and so the Packers are going to want to try to force the Patriots into third and long and other passing situations and force Hoyer to throw. Their passing attack has not been good. They've been 22nd in the league, even with Jones. And Hoyer has mostly been a below-average QB by DVOA when given the chance. He had a,
and he's not getting any younger.
Last year he had this kind of weird year where he actually had a really great rating, but it's just like 3 passes, like a total of like 11 passes spread out over 3 games in garbage time. So I don't think that really means very much. And he'll throw the INTs. He's had 35 career INTs to only 53 touchdowns.
Yeah,
so,
but
I think they're going to try to force them into passing situations. And I think they're actually going to possibly blitz more, like they did last week in Tampa Bay, because I think like Tampa Bay's receiver core, I don't think the receiving core is all that special for New England. I mean, they have some deep threats, but I think if they blitz Hoyer, I think they could have a really good chance of getting some turnovers from him. And they were willing to blitz last week, which is a bit of a deviation from his prior tendencies for Barry.
Yeah, and I would like to see them blitz Hoyer just to kind of like throw him off a little bit. I don't expect them to do it, though. I think they're just going to rush 4 and see if he can. I think they're just going to see if he can beat the coverage they have lining up out there. And I know that Jair probably will not play, and it'll be Keyshawn Nixon. And I know, even though he looked really good last week, he actually kind of struggled on further review to actually stay with the receivers from Tampa. But I think they're just going to drop into zone coverage like they have previously.
We'll see. I think they did rush. We'll see if they blitz Quay Walker again a couple times this week like they did last week.
Yes, and that was something we asked for last week, and it was something that we kind of got given because I think he's a very dynamic mover, and he's got a lot more pop than you would think for how like lean he looks. He can really move offensive linemen.
He hits with power when he he lines up his target and sends them backwards.
No, yeah. But that's kind of what we're looking for the Packers to exploit from the Patriots. Dad, did you have anything else that you want to add?
Well, I think we could make some of it feeds into kind of what we're keeping an eye out for, which maybe we can move to next is, what things we're going to watch for, which is a little bit. Some of the things I'm going to watch for are some of the things that looking for how the Packers are going to maybe exploit the Patriots. So one thing that I want to see is one thing that seemed to be missing from last week was the jet motion with Watson. They didn't really put anybody in to do any jet motion.
Yeah, they did not really have anyone to stretch the opposing defense sideline to sideline at all.
Right. And I think a lot of people felt this way. That game last week against Tampa had a lot of similar vibes to last year's playoff game against the 49ers, where we didn't have MVS, we didn't have the deep threat. We couldn't stretch the defense out and force them to go downfield and open up the run after catch and the intermediate routes. And so what I'm looking for is, will they have more jet motion now with Watson?
Yeah.
And will they be able to stretch the defense by having him, with more of a downfield threat?
Yeah, and that's I think an important distinction I want to make is, while I really think that the motion aspect of what Watson brings to this offense is important and the horizontal spacing it provides, I would really like to see them actually use him as a receiver, because it seems like he's only being used for these little gadget plays so far, and they're not really letting him run routes, at least through the first 2 games. They were really not letting him move around like actually as a receiver. They were using him almost exclusively as just motion, quick out. I would like to see them let him at least give him a chance to prove he can play some receiver, please, because I know the horizontal spacing is important, but he's also the only guy with speed, with like that kind of speed at the receiver position that they have. And like, I would like to see him run some routes.
Yeah, I was going to say, they haven't looked for him on what you consider to be more traditional routes and pass plays rather than gadget plays for a number of games now. We'll see if that starts to change as he gets more acclimated to the offense.
Yeah, and just while we're touching on the receivers, I think something that I like, as I said, I'm excited to see if Christian Watson will have a more defined role. This is his first game without Sammy Watkins playing, which is something I think is important to keep in mind, because we saw that Dobbs got a lot of work when Sammy was out. Maybe Christian Watson will also get a nice share of those targets now that Sammy's not playing. Get well soon, Sammy. We hope you're back at that minimum 4 weeks, because he was playing pretty well when he was healthy. But that
was a great game he had before.
He had a great game versus the Bears. I know he only had like 3 catches, but he was really stretching the field, which is something that they need. But I think that what I'm looking at in terms of receivers is, if the Packers choose to play man coverage, if the Patriots choose to play man coverage, will the Packers receivers be able to get separation, enough separation for Rodgers to trust the window? I guess is something that I'm looking for.
Yeah, so I'd like to, if you have more to say about the offense, or you want to switch to?
Do you have any thoughts on the Patriots playing man coverage and if the Packers can separate? Because that's kind of something that concerns me a little bit. And something concerns me long-term for this team is how they will beat man coverage, because they don't really have any one-on-one winners anymore without Devontae, in my opinion. Like, Randall Cobb is fine. Alan Lazard is fine. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are kind of unknowns, although we like what we've seen from them so far. I think this is something that's... Yeah, go ahead.
That's kind of the question for the season. I mean, how much of it can they win one-on-one and how much has to be schemed open? I mean, they were really able to get some open receivers in the first half, a couple of long plays to Cobb, even against Tampa Bay's secondary. I think that they should be able to get open receivers against New England's secondary the way they've been playing so far this season. And I think and they certainly had 8 times where Dobbs was open enough and to catch the ball downfield a little bit. Or make yards after the catch last week. And I think they'll be able to get some open. Will they do more mesh play and crossing routes to scheme people open, or run stack formations to get players open like they did in the past? I think we will always see that with the LaFleur offense. I guess the issue, to kind of what you touch on, is when it comes right down to it on 3rd and long, and who do they go to? And so far it's been like we've seen Lazard do it. We've seen Cobb do it.
Yeah.
For the most part. And then they did Tunyon. Even Tyler Davis had a nice play. I think they'll continue to spread it around. I don't think there's going to be one go-to.
But the thing is, you can say they'll continue to spread it around, but it's not like they've been very successful. Yes, they have been hitting these players, but they've been missing. They've been missing more than they've been hitting. Like, you can say that these players have had these completions and gotten these first downs and beaten man, but for the most part, they're not. We remember the ones they do. We don't remember the ones they don't. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But so I mean, what it is, they go through stretches. They'll do really well, and then they'll go through a kind of these cold stretches or something that
don't you think that could be
need to figure out?
Indicative more of LaFleur is calling plays to get these players open versus man, but he only has so many in this bag of tricks, and eventually at some point it's down to the players to win these one-on-ones. And I think it's fair to question.
Players, not plays.
I think it's Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's.
Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's.
But I do think that that's something that I'm going to look for in this game, because I think ultimately, if they're going to have success in the playoffs, which is the only thing that really matters for this team, they're going to need players to win one-on-ones. And I think the only ones they really have on their roster that I think have the ceiling to do that consistently are Watson and Dobbs. And so I would like to see them start getting those opportunities so that when the more important plays come, they have some experience.
I think Lazard can do it from the slot as well. Maybe not so much from the outside, but I think he can get some of those slot fades and other routes he's shown in the past
that's fair.
To get open, even downfield.
That's fair. I think he doesn't have the separation skills you would love, because I think while he's pretty good hands, he's able to separate on those slot fades and kind of timing routes with Rodgers. But Rodgers does not like to throw contested balls. And so I think we're going to need players to really get separation for Rodgers to trust those throws. And I just don't know if Lazard is a good enough separator to be a trustworthy man-to-man beater all the time, even if he is Rodgers' most trusted receiver.
I think one thing to look for, and I think this touches on something we both put in here, keeping an eye out for, is as the offensive line improves, is there going to be more time for receivers to get open?
Yeah,
and so
that's fair.
One thing I'm looking for is for gradual improvement in the O-line as they have more continuity in who's playing with whom, as well as shaking off the rust. I think there's been some communication issues that could get cleaned up a little bit as you have the same guy next to you for more games in a row instead of different lineup every week we've had so far.
Yeah.
So far this year.
That's a really fair point about the O-line. They are still gelling, and they have not, in the last 3 games, given Rodgers a ton of time to work. And I know that's. I mean, if Rodgers doesn't have time, then the receivers don't have time to separate. And that's something that I'm also looking for, keep my eye out for this in this game as we're kind of wrapping up the things that we're keeping our eye out for. I think it's interesting so far through 2 weeks. Elton Jenkins has really struggled at right tackle, and I know he's just making his way back. And I guess really struggled is a bit of an overstatement. He has struggled at right tackle so far. It's a position he hasn't played very much of, coming off of an injury. And so I think versus Matthew Judon, who we haven't really talked about much yet, but he is New England's best pass rusher. He's one of their best players on defense. He was probably the closest thing to a star they have on defense. I apologize for missing his name earlier when I was saying that they mostly had role players.
They had no stars.
All red sleeves, as they call them.
Their pass rush win rate has been quite good.
Yeah, say that 5 times fast. But I think, like I was saying, I'm very curious to see how Elton plays at right tackle in this game, because we're getting to the point where, like, 3 games in, 4 games in, you would hope he would start to settle in from injury, and settle in, shake the rust off. Games 1 and 2 were not great, and I would just like to see a good Elton Jenkins right tackle game, because I think it's important not only for the team this year, but for the future of the team, that he demonstrates a aptitude at that position post-injury.
Yeah, I think it's something that, because he's still so recently come back from that ACL, that his
it's true.
ACL tear is still only, 10 months ago? Or maybe it's 11 months now. That it's not that... I'd expect him to take a little bit longer to really get his feet out underneath it. Plus doing a position that he's only done very rarely in the pros.
So, follow-up question. Do you think that putting a player so recently off of a torn ACL at a position that they're not experienced in is a good idea? I know they don't have a lot of other good options.
Can Yash play right tackle?
I don't think so.
Like he did it. That's all he did at Virginia Tech.
I think if they thought he could play right tackle, they would be playing him at right tackle.
Unless they do it this week, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I would expect Elton at right tackle unless the wheels really start coming off. But that's something that I'm keeping my eye on. I would love a scenario where, my ideal offensive line with this group would probably be Bakhtiari, Elton, Myers, Runyon, Yash, or
so you'd move Runyon over to the right guard.
Yeah, I think he could figure it out. I don't understand why right guard is the hardest position for them to figure out. They don't seem to want to play Zach Tom there, and they don't seem to want to play Elton there, and they don't seem to want to play Runyon there. Because even when they were giving Tom reps at guard, they were giving him reps at left guard. And when they were giving him reps at left guard, they were having Newman rep at right guard. They weren't even moving Runyon over or anything, like trying to get their best 5, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, that actually really surprised me when they had Tom repping at left guard and not right guard.
Yeah,
that's
we could talk about that for hours. But these are the things that we're kind of keeping our eye out for in this Packers-Patriots contest coming up on Sunday afternoon. Dad, do you have anything else that you wanted to add in that front?
A little bit, because that was mostly about what we're expecting from the Packers offense.
Yes,
one thing
fair.
I'm keeping an eye out for the Packers defense is look for Kenny to cook inside on pass plays against their center. So the center, Andrews, has a subpar pass blocking grade, only by PFF, only 44.6. Pretty good run block grade, though. And I think Kenny has had the most pressures for a defense, or pressure rate for a defensive tackle.
Yeah, I think he's tied for second
one of the
in
top
pressures, total pressures amongst D tackles.
And so the Packers, because they actually play at a pretty slow pace of play, because they use a lot of clock themselves, there aren't that many plays per game. We especially saw that, I think, in the Bears game.
Yeah, that was a fast game. That was a fast prime time. That's the fastest I've ever seen a primetime game go by.
Right. So they'll be down a little bit in counting stats because of it, just because there aren't as many plays per game as some of the teams that snap it really quickly. They just have more plays to rack up total counting stats. But in terms of rate stats, I think Kenny's been killing it, and I think that if they have to pass, he's going to be blowing up the Patriots center.
And I think that's a big thing. I would like to see them, if they have the opportunity to win the coin toss, I would like to see them take the kick and receive so that they can get a lead, because I think this New England team is going to be way easier to play with if the Packers have a lead.
This has been the thing I've been screaming about for 3 years now. Please start with the ball, because it makes your defense better. It makes your offense better. if you're forcing the other team to play from behind at the beginning.
So what's happening here, if you don't know, is that the numbers say you should defer because if you can get the first to second half turn and score twice, the odds of winning go way up. But I think for the Packers specifically, it feels like they just play so much better with a lead that it would be beneficial to them to start with the ball despite what the numbers say. And I'm someone who will almost always trust the numbers, but I think in this case, it just seems like the Packers play better when they start with the ball.
I have to do more homework in this front just to see if
what the Packers' record is when they start with the ball.
If I'm just going with confirmation bias here.
Yeah, it is definitely one of those things that I think is prone to confirmation bias, but I agree with you that it feels better when the Packers start with the ball.
And maybe the confirmation bias is, I just love having the lead. This is awesome.
Well, it also doesn't it seem like the Packers' defense on the first drives of games has been very bad this year?
It's been weird, they let's let the other
march
teams
down the field instantly
score.
And then they lock up for the rest of the game.
I think the other team has marched on the field on the opening drive of every game and then done
nothing.
The last two not much after that. It's like it's like they're like doing a Jedi mind trick. Hey, show us all your plays on your first drive, so then you'll have nothing left for the rest of the game.
It's like. It's like, oh no, this drive is scripted. I guess they're going to score, but we'll get them when the drives are not scripted. It's like I would like to see them get a stop on the first drive, but anyway, we're kind of rambling on now, Dad. Did you have anything more that you wanted to add on what we're keeping our eye out for?
I think I've rambled enough.
Okay, so let's end with a score prediction, Dad.
So I think the Packers are going to win this one pretty handily. So I'm going with 28-10 Packers.
Okay. And Packers are home in this one. I believe they are 10.5-point favorites the last time I saw. I think they cover, but just barely. I'm going to go with 24-10. I think they struggle a little early out of the gates, but I think they kind of, by the second quarter, kind of make this game pretty comfortable, I would think.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are going to struggle to move the ball and score, and so they might not even get a touchdown. I was tempted to say 28-9, that they couldn't actually get into the end zone, but we'll see what happens.
Let's hope so. But anyway, wrapping up here, this has been the Father-Son Packers podcast, coming to you on Friday night. Normally, we will come to you on Thursday night for these pre-games. Sunday night, we will be doing a post-game for this Packers-Patriots game, hopefully after a win, but we will be here, rain or shine. But anyways, Dad, anything more for the lovely people?
Nope, I think that wraps it up.
Okay. Well, like we said, come check us out on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. And until next time, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.